Baby, baby.
Good morning. It is October 20th, 2020. It is before noon when I'm recording this, so I'm allowed to say good morning. It is NotoriousSA, and this is the NotoriousSA podcast. Well, I was going to make something yesterday, and then in the middle of recording, I just didn't want to do it anymore. Honestly, it's not as easy as it sounds, right? Just sitting in front of a microphone and talking. I try to make something that is worth listening to, and frankly, if I don't think it's up to that, and I feel like what I'm saying doesn't have the kind of flow I'm looking for, or it doesn't have the same kind of energy, I don't want to put out stuff that's just kind of half-assed and not fun. So, if I'm trying to talk about something, I want to try to talk about something where I can have a bit to talk about, provide context, and kind of give some interesting information. So what I am going to tell you is that I am planning a special podcast where I detail a story about me that happened a decade ago, and it involves me and blood loss, and I'll leave it at that, because if you know what I'm talking about, you know it's a crazy story. If you don't, wait till you hear it. It's something. So look for that in the future. As of today, there are 2 weeks to go until, what we call Election Day, but voting's already happened in America. In 2 weeks, voting ends. Think of it that way. Instead of thinking as November 3rd is the day everybody votes, think of November 3rd as the last day to vote. Right? That's the day that you have to make a decision, and if you don't get a say in the electoral process. Depending on where you are at every state, the jurisdictions are different in terms of who can early vote and how, but 2 weeks from now will be when everybody gets one last chance to do so. My cat has decided to be interested in what I'm doing, which of course is inopportune time, so congratulations maybe for being adorable. How do you feel about the election? Are you confident that it's going to be decided on election night or within the days after? Do you think it's going to be clear who the winner is? Do you think it's going to be trustworthy about who won? I think so. I look back and I ask myself, when I'm talking to people about this particular election, just the amount of things that are going on all at once, and I hate to say this word because it's been abused, but unprecedented. I would not be surprised if unprecedented is the word of 2020, because literally every day something unprecedented happens. We live in an unprecedented time with unprecedented challenges, and everything that could possibly seem to be going wrong is. There's a global pandemic for the first time in a century. There's economic collapse as a result of said global pandemic. There's long-standing economic and racial injustices that are coming to light. Again, with the pandemic emphasizing how bad society's divisions are. And yet, when I look back into 2008, right, when the financial crisis was happening and there was economic collapse abound, people were divided over the election, although it seemed to be more so that we were clear that Barack Obama was going to win, but people were upset with the administration that was currently in charge. People began to lose faith in the system, and they put a lot of hope in at least one particular candidate to be the person to solve all of our problems. I'm trying to make an honest comparison, and maybe it's with hindsight that I can, but what I saw as a 19-year-old and what I see as a 31-year-old, there are some similarities, but there's also a lot of key differences that matter. It seems like back then, there was a very limited amount of information that people were getting as opposed to now. And if you are an adult, and by that I mean you're my age, right? Try to remember what the situation was like in 2008, right? The smartphone has only been around for a year, and most people don't have it. The internet is still there and functioning for everybody to have. Facebook is becoming the predominantly large social networking site. Twitter is on the rise as well. MySpace is still the popular option for most people. Barack Obama has just figured out how to use Facebook to his advantage, and he's starting to connect with voters in ways that no other politician had before, and that would be expanded upon later in this 2012 campaign. And then now everybody needs to have a social media person in politics. It seemed like back then we were more optimistic about the future, and maybe that's because people thought that he was going to win and that the system would work in their favor, and that therefore it was more legitimate. It just seems like there's a lot less faith in the system with this particular election than there have been in other elections. And people will argue that's because President Trump has made it illegitimate, or it's always been illegitimate and President Trump just showed it, or people are just so sick and tired of hearing about it that they now think it's illegitimate. But here's the thing, it's not illegitimate, right? It's not as if President Trump just showed up and won the election, then all of a sudden all of the mechanics and the wheels of government that we've established since 1776 has all been for nothing. I would feel it'd be pretty sad if Donald Trump was able to, quote unquote, break America and mean that we have to stop everything we're doing, burn it all down, and try to start from scratch. That's what some people are saying. Now, I remember in 2008 when Obama was calling for a fundamental transformation of America, and his opponents said that that meant that he didn't respect America's past and that he was going to try to change it to something that's nowhere close to what it was or what it is today. Now, this was obviously a hyperbolic attack line, as Barack Obama did not, in fact, fundamentally transform America. If anything, electing Barack Obama showed that we really hadn't gotten past issues that we thought we did get past. And look at the news coverage from that time, right? Look at the Obama inauguration and look at the words post-racial. It wasn't that long ago that we were supposed to be living in a post-racial society. Something that people thought was unfathomable, which was that we would elected an African American for president, not only did, but did so in large, overwhelming numbers. That we were past those kind of historic divides that had been there. And as Obama himself admitted, this is an issue that he tried to address during the campaign and throughout the presidency, but, and as I'm paraphrasing what he said, he wasn't able to, quote-unquote, solve the issue. Not that anybody could solve the issue, but I'm assuming where he's coming from is that a lot of these long-term divides over racial lines might have been broken by him being president. And you know what? In a way it is. Think about it. The vast majority of the American population is more supportive of the previous president than the current one. And it's not just as a matter of comparing the two of them personality-wise. It's the political atmosphere surrounding it. It's the fact that the opponent to Donald Trump and the likely next president, based on the current numbers, is Barack Obama's vice president. It's almost as if America was saying that between 2009 and 2017, we seemed to have something figured out that was pretty positive and most people were okay with. So we're basically wanting to do that. And I will say, for being my formative adult years, there were some rough times. Like, I believe the Great Recession was the recession that I was supposed to live through, and I understood that doing that would somehow permanently damage my long-term economic prospects. I made peace with that. I accepted that the world is different in a post-2008 financial crisis, the same way I accepted it was different post-September 11th. Right? I'm willing to live through all of these things and try to just go on with my life. But then this happens. Then a pandemic happens, and the ensuing economic problems that go with it. And it just seems like, can a man get a break here? Can a man get a break from the unrelenting effort that is life? I wish. I'm assuming that Illinois Department of Employment Security is going to call me back at some point soon. 2 weeks to the day since I've called them, so cool, waiting on that. Anyway, the longer point I'm trying to make here is that it seems like, in terms of America being divided, I don't believe it really is. And when I say divided, I don't mean like irrevocably divided or like 50-50 divided. It seems like America is divided, but in a way that seems there is a majority and there is a minority, and that the only difference between which one of those two gets power is who shows up more consistently and who's able to bring in more people when necessary. These are two different things. What I mean by that is when you look at, and this is just a broad view of the world, right? Broad 20,000-foot view here. If you look at the states that Obama won in 2008 and 2012, if you look at his overall approval rating throughout his presidency and when he left, if you look at Donald Trump's states that he won in 2016 and you look at his overall approval rating, they all seem to kind of correlate in that it seems as though most of America feels one way and a sizable minority feels a different way. But if this world is purely a binary choice and everybody involved on both sides actually participates, it seems like anywhere between 55% of the country feels one way and 45% of the country feels another. Now, it's not 50-50, right? It's not as if it's a dead heat between both, or it's 90% feels one way and 10% feels another. It's the vast majority of us, and when I say vast majority, it's because generally anything over 55% seems like what we would consider a safe percentage, as in you're likely to win the majority of the time. But America has a system where 45% of the country can also essentially become in charge of one, if not all, of the branches of government. And that 45% could be just the pure population in total. It could be the red states versus the blue states. It could be those who consider themselves Republican, conservative versus liberals or Democrats. But if you look at the numbers about how often people don't vote versus they do, you'll see that 45% of the country consistently comes out to vote. every time in every election. And the 55%, there's also a significant amount that do, but less so. Less so in terms of midterm elections and local elections. The long-term effect of that is that the Republican Party from 2010 to 2017 had a massive growth spree across state legislators across the country, overtaking the House of Representatives, most state governments, the Senate, eventually the presidency, and now with the soon-to-be Supreme Court nomination, the Supreme Court of the United States as well. Their long-term project to project power and influence over the government, over what is likely the majority populace will, is a system that we live in, and it can happen, but I think the long-term consequence is that when you're the minority, the numbers are not on your side, which means that you can try to keep power artificially, which it seems in my mind the Republican Party has. They've done it through manipulation of maps to try to elect more people to positions of power than the population would normally provide. They've done it through what I would call maybe excessive emphasis on voter fraud. They've also done it just by trying to make turnout happen in rural and ex-urban and suburban areas. But if the Trump presidency has taught us anything, it's that that majority of the population that voted for Obama in 2008 probably has always felt a certain way, but a lot of them just didn't bother to show up to vote because they didn't feel that their voice mattered, or that other people would vote and they would be able to elect the people they would want to win anyway. So what happens is we get Donald Trump through a combination of factors, including those who consistently vote, those who vote for change, third parties, etc. There's a whole host of factors that go into it. But now it's different. Now, and people will say, and there are lots of people who are predicting that Trump would win, or should win. Many of them are saying by a landslide, but others are basically trying to predict probably something closer to 2016, where it's another squeaker. If the math is correct, and that is to say that while the polls can be wrong, the odds of them being this wrong are highly unlikely. And again, we won't know until it's all said and done, but if 2018 was an indicator of their corrections, and if you even take into account what 2016 got right, it's not as if the country is in this 50-50 position because 5% of the country left the majority to support the minority, and other parts of the country didn't come up to make up the difference. Now what we're seeing is that same percentage of people who approve of Obama or disapprove of Trump, who odds are lean to the center and the center left, all being engaged critically and having their focus exclusively on one plan, which is to get the president to be a one-term president. And look, this is not to be a buzzkill if you're a Trump supporter, right? I always stress the fact that he is the current president, and based on certain factors, there is a possibility that he will win again. And if he does win, it will not in fact be the end of democracy as we know it. I know that's a popular position to take, that Trump is a threat to everything that we stand for and everything that we believe in. I do think that the president is not up to the job, and that it would likely be better if he just wasn't in a position of authority. Not to say that what he has brought up and what he has stirred isn't worth discussing, but just the person himself is not up to the challenge of where we're at. Look, if you go to any site that is trying to predict what is happening right now, and if you go to, for example, here I am on realclearpolitics.com, looking at their battleground map, right now, currently, they, based on all the polling averages, have Joe Biden at 216 votes, either in the likely or leans category, and 125 for President Trump. Right? What they're saying is that Pennsylvania, Florida, Wisconsin, Michigan, North Carolina, Arizona, Ohio, Georgia, Iowa, Nevada, Texas, Maine's 2nd Congressional District, Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District, and Minnesota are all too close to call. This is simple math, folks. It takes 270 electoral votes to win. Joe Biden currently is projected at 216. He needs 54 votes out of those states. 54 votes. And it doesn't take a lot to make that cascade go from just barely winning to being a tsunami. And look, if you look at 270towin.com, which is also using different consensus maps, and I think is a little bit more direct in terms of narrowing down what is a swing state, Joe Biden is at 290 electoral votes. Trump's at 163, with 85 votes undecided in the swing states. Iowa, Ohio, North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. I don't have to tell you that that's not close. That's a guaranteed win for Joe Biden. It's just a matter of by how much. And that's what's happening. This year, 2020, looks a lot like 2008. But not because we're optimistic about the future with the candidates we have. Right? The vast majority of America is voting for a candidate that the vast majority are not voting for because of him. They're voting for in spite of the other candidates. So, this might sound like a confusing word salad, but the majority of Americans appear to support Joe Biden. And the majority of people who support Joe Biden only support him because they oppose President Trump. And President Trump supporters are a minority, but a majority of that minority are supporting President Trump because they support the president and not primarily because they are opposed to Joe Biden. So it's if you think about it, the vast majority of the country wants someone else to be president because they don't want the current guy to be president. It's a weird situation where we're not in a position to actually favor our leaders, but we're just trying to do the least bad option. And it seems like that's also a repeat of 2016, where we're trying to pick between one bad option and another bad option. I know that's always been the case, and it's always been the trope, I should say, that we're always dealing with the lesser of two evils. But I have to say that 2016 and 2020 have probably put some of the least popular candidates up for running the country. Looking back, 2012, 2008, 2004, 2000, 96, 92. Think back as far as you can, right? Is it worse than those times? It is. It's definitely worse. Maybe it's because of the pandemic. Maybe it's because we're all overloaded with information that makes everybody anxious and sad and tired all the time. Maybe it's because we don't live in the 1990s and America's position in the world seems different and it's been threatened by change, by a more globalized, more interconnected, seemingly less honest world. So what does that mean? If the vast majority of America wants someone to be in charge primarily because they don't like the current person in charge. And now for something different. I may have mentioned earlier that I've been going to the library and getting books again because reading actual books is good for the mind. The most recent book I read is called This America, The Case for the Nation by Jill Lepore. It's a fantastic little read. It's a very small book. It's only about 150 pages if you include the references. And it talks about what it means to be America as a nation and calling for something called New Americanism, a generous patriotism that requires an honest reckoning with America's past. So what I wanted to do to finish this is, since we're all kind of divided about what the future holds, I like to think that a version of Americanism will be what we need. And then I feel like the way the book ends definitely grabs my attention and should grab yours too. So this format's a little weird because this is actually the ending to the podcast, but it's going to come after the segment for New Americanism. So enjoy that and look out for the next podcast in the future where I will be talking about other stuff and also the big episode where I talk about the event that changed my life 10 years ago. So enjoy, stay tuned, and take care. A New Americanism, taken from the book This America, The Case for the Nation by Jill Lepore. A New Americanism. The United States is a nation founded on a revolutionary, generous, and deeply moral commitment to human equality and dignity. In the very struggles that constitute this nation's history, in the very struggles that lie ahead, the United States holds to these truths. All of us are equal, we are equal as citizens, and we are equal under the law. For all the agony of the nation's past, these truths remain. Anyone who affirms these truths and believes that we should govern our common life together belongs in this country. That is America's best idea. Frederick Douglass once offered his understanding of this nation. Quote, "A government founded upon justice and recognizing the equal rights of all men, claiming no higher authority for its existence or sanction for its laws than nature, reason, and the regularly ascertained will of the people. Steadily refusing to put its sword and purse in the service of any religious creed or family is a standing offense to most of the governments of the world, and to some narrow and bigoted people among ourselves." End quote. These words are no less true a century and a half on. Americans are bound by our past, but even more powerfully, we are bound to one another. A new Americanism would have to honor the striving and sacrifices
of Americans whose families have been in the United States for generations and those who have only just arrived. It would have to honor the sovereignty of native nations. It would have to uphold the aspirations of everyone. In 2011, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Jose Antonio Vargas, an undocumented immigrant, began asking immigrants and the children of immigrants to define American. "I define American as my family," said one little girl. A nation is that collection of definitions. This America is a community of belonging and commitment held together by the strength of our ideas and by the force of our disagreements. A nation founded on universal ideas will never stop fighting over the meaning of its past and the direction of its future. That doesn't mean the past or the future is meaningless or directionless or that anyone can afford to sit out the fight. The nation, as ever, is the fight. In a world made up of nations, there is no more powerful way to fight the forces of prejudice, intolerance, and injustice than by a dedication to equality, citizenships, and equal rights as guaranteed by a nation of laws. A new Americanism would mean a devotion to equality and liberty, tolerance and inquiry, justice and fairness, along with a commitment to national prosperity inseparable from an unwavering dedication to a sustainable environment the world over. It would require a clear-eyed reckoning with American history, its sorrows no less than its glories. A lie stands on one foot, as Benjamin Franklin liked to say, but a truth stands upon two. A new Americanism would rest on the history that tells the truth, as best it can, about what W.E.B. Du Bois called the hideous mistakes, the frightful wrongs, and the great and beautiful things that nations do. It would foster a spirit of citizenship and environmental stewardship and a set of civic ideals, and a love of one another marked by benevolence and hope and a dedication to community and honesty. Looking both backward and forward, it would know that right wrongs no man. The history of the United States at the present time does not seek to answer any significant questions, Carl Degler told an audience of historians some 3 decades ago. Degler, like all of us, had his own blind spots, but he did not sit out the struggle. And if people who care about the nation's past and future and the endurance of liberal democratic nations don't start asking and answering these sorts of questions, he warned, other people will. They'll declare America a carnage. They'll call immigrants animals and other countries shitholes. They'll call themselves nationalists. They'll say that they can make America great again. Their history will be a fiction. They will say that they alone love this country. They will be wrong.